Hi, this is The Greatest Story Ever Played. I'm Dan, and I've got two guests here to talk about Control. First up, we've got Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan. You can find me on Twitter at MiscutMorgan.
And then we've also got Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I've been on here twice before. I don't have any other way to follow me. Sorry.
Perfect. Awesome. So this is exciting. Both of these guys have been on before. Morgan last on with Alan Wake. So staying in the Remedy verse for that. So exciting. And then Kevin breaking trend. Normally on indie games, we talked about Limbo and Journey. So Control is not like those. So exciting that we're all here to talk about a good game in Control. Before we dive into that, I did have one quick thing off top, which is I wanted to say thanks to Eli for becoming a supporter on Patreon. Really appreciate that you decided to back us financially and support the podcast in that way. So thanks, Eli. If you'd like to do that, you can also. Patreon.com/TheGreatestStoryEverPlayed. There, if you go there for as little as $1 per month, that will get you access to monthly bonus episodes we do that are topical in nature. So we've done things like our favorite Pokemon, or we talked about our favorite games from childhood, things like that. So if that sounds like something you'd want to do or listen to, join Eli on Patreon and check that out. Cool. All right, now on to the main event, Control. I've got a description off top I'll read for us. It says, from the developer Remedy Entertainment, who's known for Max Payne and Alan Wake, Control is a supernatural third-person action-adventure that challenges you to master a combination of supernatural abilities, modifiable loadouts, and reactive environments while fighting through a deep and unpredictable world. After a secretive agency in New York is invaded by an otherworldly threat, take on the role of Jesse Faden, the building's new director, and fight to regain control of the situation. Explore a vast concrete skyscraper known as the Oldest House with your trusty service weapon, a supernatural, shape-shifting sidearm, in hand. The vast, ever-shifting environment, far bigger on the inside than the exterior world would suggest. It's filled with far deeper secrets. Yeah, that really sums it up, what this game is. I think if that already sounds like something you like, you're in for it. As we said in the recap, or in the description, it's from Remedy, Alan Wake, Quantum Break, Max Payne. If you know and like those games, you also probably know and like Control. I think their games fit that. So, I guess from here, we wanted to jump into some non-spoiler thoughts to give you a little bit about what we thought about the game without, spoiling anything in the story. So this might give you further of an idea if this is maybe a game for you. So what do you guys have? What kind of stood out to you about this game?
So I think my favorite thing, I'm like Dan was saying at the top of the episode, I'm not typically into like the AAA games. I'm more into indie stuff, definitely more story-driven stuff. I loved Control. I think it's probably going to top out one of my favorite games. Definitely one of my favorite games of the last year, and one of my favorite games of all time. And I think part of what I loved about it so much is that the genre that it fits into, I don't know if you guys have heard the term, but it's called like New Weird. And kind of like what New Weird, something else that New Weird would be like the Southern Reach book series, Annihilation, that kind of stuff. Stranger Things, it's sort of like the normal being slightly twisted and being abnormal. The thing that it reminded me of the most is back in like 2012, 2013, I was really into this internet site, kind of like a posting board called SCP. It was sort of like otherworldly, like X-Files-y sort of little mini stories. And I loved the hell out of that stuff. And this game gave me similar vibes to that. So I know that Morgan, you felt the same way. We talked about it beforehand with like the SCP stories.
Right. Kind of like a Night Vale podcast vibes, if either of you guys ever checked that out. Or like even Twilight Zone. But I like the way you put it where it's like kind of a normal setting and then just like different things are tweaked about it.
Yeah, that was my feel too, of listening to Night Vale, liking X-Files a lot. Again, feels those things. Also, even the game Beyond Two Souls, the beginning of this really felt like that to me as well, because of some stuff we'll get into. But it kind of captures that. And I think that's pretty fun, of kind of new weird, but then, I don't know, corporate, or not corporate, but like government kind of shit going on too.
Yeah,
of
definitely.
that sort of fit.
That's part of it. I think that's the other thing is it's sort of like the whole game borders around order versus chaos, right? Like that's kind of the whole game. So you have the foundation that represents like the order and doing things like the right way, the straight and narrow. And then you have the enemy, which I mean we'll probably talk about in a little bit, but they are, utter chaos. There is no certifiable pattern for them. So I think it's really cool to see like an overarching story that's based on a very simple order versus chaos setup.
And one of the things I liked was that the setting in which this takes place is kind of like a character. The oldest house. It's this shape-shifting skyscraper, and as you complete objectives, as you cleanse certain part of it, like it kind of reverts back to like a weird office building, things like that. But kind of like an office building mixed with like the Sanctum Sanctorum from Doctor Strange.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it.
Did either of you have other things about the game that you like that you'd want to mention on before we get further?
So one of the biggest things about this game is its difficulty level. Mm-hmm. I first played through this game when it came out in 2017, right? And 2019, sorry.
I think.
And
I think that's right.
There was one boss battle where I almost quit the game entirely. Well, I did quit for a period, and then tried to replay the game up to that point. We'll talk about him later. But I just wanted to kind of, if everybody's listening to this podcast because they wanted to hear the story but gave up because of the difficulty, I wanted to let you know that they have accessibility options now that they've implemented because they want to tell their like awesome story and they want to make it accessible. So there's a wide variety of changes. You can either like give yourself more ammo, infinite ammo. You can give yourself a little more life if you find yourself just not quite getting there with some boss battles. You can make yourself invincible. You can give yourself more energy to use your various abilities, things like that. So there's a lot of ways to tweak it if you don't want the easiest experience in the world still, but you do want to like continue to drive through the story, or you can even put yourself in story mode basically and just make yourself unkillable so you can still progress through this game's awesome story. So if you were listening to this podcast to still get the story because the game was too hard, I'd recommend going and trying out those accessibility options and then joining us back here at this podcast afterwards.
Yeah, a big fan of those. So Morgan had mentioned there, so Control doesn't have difficulty options. You can't choose like easy mode or hard mode or those. Instead you have those sliders, which I think is a cool way to approach that of, I'm having trouble because of this thing or that thing. I played God mode most of the time though, to be honest. I had intended to use them and then I'd gotten to a part and I was like, well, this might be where I'd stop, so I'm just going to go God mode and play instead because I want to see what's here. And I'm glad I did that. And I'm glad that they made the game so that I could do that as well. Yeah. So, good move on Remedy. Because, and I think that does really help because there were different things of like, yeah, ammo's the thing that keeps getting me in trouble. Cool. Change that. Health is the thing that gets me in trouble. Cool. I'll change that. Whatever. So, I agree. Big fan of that. I like that they had those options.
It kind of seemed to me like they made it kind of for everybody because you've got the accessibility options like we're talking about here, but then also you're really rewarded if you wanted that difficult play style, if you wanted a challenge. And I think that's part of what I liked about it so much is the combat is really hectic and fast-paced and there is no slowing down. You're kind of just throwing everything you've got at the enemies. But then there are other parts of the game where it really slows down. It lets you take your time exploring and finding new rooms and new places that maybe wouldn't show up randomly in the story mode. But if you took your time and you slowed down and you just, I think I'm going to go down this hallway that I know isn't where I'm supposed to go, but I kind of just want to explore, you're still rewarded for that. It's really cool to see a game that kind of, it's as difficult or as simple as you want it to be.
Yeah.
I think that also something you mentioned there that's nice is that as you play the game, you kind of get used to what things will be. So there's some hallways you'll see and you're like, no one's going to come out and attack me here. This isn't a chaotic part. I can just read and listen to everything that's in this room. No one's going to surprise me and like ruin that for me. Instead, you can engage in that. And I think they balance that really well of chaotic, high-paced combat like you talked about, and then other parts where I just read fucking everything. You know, it was like if there was a case file, I was reading it. If there was a video to watch, I watched it. Because I think that's like a big part in the Remedyverse from my experiences. Take all that shit in. Like, you could mainline this and just have fun fighting. And sure, it'd probably be an enjoyable game, but I do think that going into that other stuff really boosted it. And I know I really enjoyed that. Like, kind of, okay, what is this world?
Right. We talked a little bit about, on our Alan Wake podcast that we did together, about how these universes are intertwined. All of just like the backstory in the main game, not even DLC considered, just really adds depth to those other games, things like that. It really makes me excited for like the future of their franchises.
Definitely.
But I also wanted to say, just really wanted to emphasize, getting the collectibles is super worth it. Whether you want to learn about like what happened before you came to the Bureau, or want to learn about like, especially Darling is just a super interesting character just as you go through. So it is really worth getting those collectibles. It felt very satisfying to collect.
And what was fun with them too is like some of them you'd get a big reveal of like an AWE somewhere, and you're like, oh, whoa, that's cool. And then other ones, it's like bureaucratic bullshit, and it's like, hey, my boss is doing this thing, so I'm going to waste all this money.
Yeah.
Or something like that, and you're like,
and I think that's where the comedy of these people are working in a supernatural office kind of thing comes in, and it's like, it's just the mundanity in like the Twilight Zone or in the X-Files that just like makes me laugh. Just the absurdity.
It kind of fits into what we keep mentioning, is that it's as deep or as shallow, as difficult or easy as you want it to be. If you like a game that you can spend hours just looking at stuff and reading and exploring the world, this is that game. If you like a game that's really challenging just from a playability standpoint, this is also that game. If you like a game that you have a fun time with, and it's not so difficult you want to throw the controller through your TV, this is also that game. I think it's also, and this will probably be my last point, is just how beautiful the game is.
Yes.
It's one of the best looking games I've ever played, and this was the first game, so I got a new graphics card for my computer. This was the first game I fired up on it because I wanted to really push the envelope and see how good can this game look, because I already knew it was one of the best looking games. I wanted to really test my graphics card using this game, and it was so rewarding. And we'll talk a little later about just like, I have some notes about how graphically intense the game is, but also I think this is one of the best photo modes I've ever seen in a game. I don't know if you guys played around with the photo mode at all.
Yeah.
So it just gives you so much freedom in controlling where the camera is, what even the focal length is. So if you want like a blurry background, and you want, if you want your main character, Jessie, if you want her in focus in the shot, cool, you can do that. And the game is so beautiful that it's just fun to zoom around in photo mode and look at all the little interesting details. And, I think my computer background for like a couple months when I was playing this game was a screenshot I took in the game. So just graphically, it's just a beautiful game.
That's amazing.
And they actually won Game of the Year for Best Art Direction that year.
Nice.
Among many other nominations for Game of the Year.
Well deserved,
Yeah.
I would say.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, so that's a little bit about Control. Hopefully that sells you. If you want to play it, come back when you're done. Otherwise, it will be spoilers from here on, so beware. Also, in Control, there are a lot of characters in this game, so I think it's worth doing kind of a brief rundown of the main folks that pop in through the game. So first up, we've got Jessie Faden. She's our protagonist. She's who we play as, and the game finds her drawn to the Bureau. She's looking for her brother and is just kind of led there by Polaris, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Just kind of walks into this chaotic situation off the street almost, and she's not fazed by the chaos. but, you kind of are, but because she's not, you're not as much. So it is kind of a fun sort of intro to it. Then we've got Dylan Faden. That's Jesse's estranged brother, who she hasn't seen since they were kids. Kind of like Mulder's sister in X-Files. It sort of gives you that sort of vibe of trying to track that down, and is that what's led here, all that. Then we've got Zachariah Trench. He's the director of the Bureau of Control. We've got Casper Darling, head researcher. We mentioned him a little bit. We've got Emily Pope. She's a research specialist, so she's kind of under Darling in there. Helen Marshall, head of operations. Simon Arash is the security chief. We've got Ati, who's a mysterious janitor. The game begins and you end up running into him, and it's clear a lockdown's going on, and he's just mopping the floor doing his thing, and is not phased. He talks to you as if you're his intern kind of thing. So he's a unique guy. And then lastly, I think worth mentioning, is Polaris, who is this resonance, I guess, that's guiding Jesse. I don't know, I kind of consider it similar to a spirit. That's what kind of made me get the Beyond Two Souls vibes. Mm-hmm. That game also has sort of a spirit within it sort of thing that leads the main character. And so this one similarly has that going on. And Polaris and Jesse have a long-standing relationship that you'll learn more about as we go. I did have one question. This is probably only pertinent to the three of us in this room. But do we say the mall near our house wrong? Or, in Columbus? We have a mall in Columbus called Polaris, which I believe is spelled the same way.
I've always heard Polaris.
I've only heard Polaris as well, but she says Polaris the whole time. So are people in Columbus stupid and we call our mall the wrong thing? I know, sorry, podcast people, it's probably not relevant to you as much, but I thought it was just so weird because I was like, we have a mall named this and we call it something else. So either Jesse's using a weird way to say it, or we all are.
I mean, should we just start saying Polaris Parkway and see if people give us a
look
double
at us
look?
weird?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, it is a proper noun, and I listen to audiobooks a lot, and even the two people that they have narrating the different chapters say the character's names wrong, and it always irks me. So, I mean, it's a proper noun, so it's a name. There's
say whatever you want.
Yeah.
I guess Polaris
I
is
am
the one
going to
who's
say Polaris. And
Yeah, I just thought it was funny when I was playing. I was like, it's my mall named wrong. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll let that go. Also, weirdly, actually, I'm going to say it anyway. In Beyond Two Souls, the spirit is called Aiden, but it's spelled like Aiden. And I've never heard anyone say Aiden ever, except for the main character in Beyond Two Souls who calls the spirit Aiden. But it's spelled like Aiden. I've never heard anyone else say it. And so it was weird that it struck weird here too, is that the spirit is named something familiar, but said in a different way.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on in these sci-fi universes. Or if Ohio doesn't know how to speak, that's very possible.
Probably correct.
Yeah.
Maybe Ohio's like the alternate dimension, and that's why we say it wrong.
Maybe.
There's some cryptology.
Yeah.
Cryptid stories.
Yeah. So, weird stuff. Anyway, weird names aside, we'll head into our game. So those are our who's who. Those are really the people we'll probably talk about along the way. There are maybe some generic folks. There are lots of generic folks we meet along the way. There are also other people we may meet that we might not mention who are in this game because really, like we've said before, there's a lot you can do. There are a lot of people you can see. But I think those are kind of our highlights. So, we'll begin our recap going into what happens in Control. So, Jessie arrives at the oldest house, and it's under lockdown. She's been lived there by Polaris. She's she's on a mission, but she also doesn't really want to reveal to anyone that she'll come into contact about Polaris, right? That's not really a conversation that wins people to your side very quickly. Hey, this spirit led me here. All right.
Right.
Sure. But she's running through this lockdown, and she meets Ati, the janitor. She asks them for directions, and he tells her how to go where she needs to. And, he's just listening to his headphones mopping, no regard that there's a lockdown going on. He's doing his janitor duties and is not fazed. It almost feels like like the mundane of the supernatural thing of this shit happens all the time. I'm going to keep mopping.
Right.
So she gets directed to the director's office. That's where she needs to go. Ati thinks that she's there for an interview, I think, to be his intern, essentially.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, if you go to the director's office, you'll get what you need to do, and you'll be there. She gets there, though, and she finds the director, Zachariah Trench, dead. And he's got his service weapon by his head. And so you pick it up.
And the implication is he shot himself.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And you pick it up, and that's where everything starts to change.
Right.
This leads you to the astral plane, is that right?
Yeah.
So this gets you to the astral plane. You pick up the gun, and you go to the astral plane. This is sort of this alternate dimension.
It's like a tutorial.
Yeah, and is this where you do the practice mode thing where you go across the bricks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the basic, how do you move around in this game?
Okay, so you go through the practice mode trial type thing, and then the board appoints you director at this point. You've passed the trial.
Have you talked about the service weapon?
Go for it.
So the service weapon is a shape-shifting weapon that kind of shifts to like what's needed at the time, or like what the intent of the user is, and it's also the signal of office for the Federal Bureau of Control. So when Jessie picks it up, and it responds to her, that signals her as the new director. Right,
that the weapons responded to you, therefore you're the person.
Right, and as we progress through the game, we see it starts out as a pistol, but it can take various forms.
There's some cool, deep lore stuff about the service weapon, too, that maybe we'll talk about later on, but it's really cool idea.
Yeah. It's definitely cool stuff. So, Jessie passes the test, appointed by the board. Suddenly, she's in charge of this chaotic situation. Where she's also, has her own motive. She's not here to do this, but has stumbled into this job of sorts. I know this isn't the way this legend works, but it's like if you took King Arthur's sword and then you became the next King Arthur, and you're like, well, I wasn't really trying to do that. I was just trying to use this weapon. Like, it's sort of an idea like that, almost, of now Jessie's in this spot. Okay, fine. I'll use my new position. I will try to help things here, but really I have my mission overall.
Yeah, it is a really interesting dynamic where, like, she has her goal of finding Dylan, but, like, as the game progresses, as she saves these people from the enemy, she starts to care about them, and she starts to try and help them for the sake of helping them. But it's kind of like two sides pulling at the same rope. It's like it is a tension there, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate it.
No, it's cool that you get her asides. She's kind of talking in her head to Polaris, and it helps you to kind of orient yourself in the world of, oh, okay, why is she here? What is she doing? What is she moving towards?
Like,
yeah, it's nice to hear that motivation without just being. I mean, I guess you are just kind of told, but it's kind of nice to have that background context.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way to do it and not have it be like a journal,
right,
or something like that. Like instead, you're kind of getting the
or as you're traveling too.
Yeah, and so I like that. I thought that was good as well. So now you're the director, so you got to start doing director stuff, which is. You start fighting people who've been possessed by the Hiss. The Hiss is basically the evil entity that's infected the office here. It takes the form of being red most of the time. Mm-hmm. And people who are infected by it are red. And so it would be someone who worked at the Bureau, but they've been corrupted, essentially. If you played Alan Wake, similar to like the people in the woods who are all in dark.
Taken.
Taken, who attack you. Same idea, except instead former Bureau people. And so you start making your way through some hallways. You fight some infected. Kind of gives you the idea of, okay, this is what the game will be. This is a thing that happens. And you make your way to the central executive area, and you cleanse a control point. So there's like a big circle on the ground that you'll go to, and you'll basically like put your hand down on for a certain amount of time, and it uninfects the area.
Yeah, Polaris will drive out the Hiss. So the Hiss is some kind of like vocal resonance that like possesses people, takes them over, something like that. And the reason why you're not susceptible to being taken over is because Polaris is like has this like noise that's counteracting them basically. and you see like your agents that haven't been infected, they have HRAs. I forget the H word, but it's residence something.
Hedron.
Hedron residence. Yeah. And like you see in the backstory that Darling kind of saw this coming, and he had them start developing it and things like that, and everybody was kind of against him. But so you're not affected because of Polaris inside you or with you, and then you see other people with like the HRAs that keep them safe.
Right, which essentially look like a bulletproof vest kind of
Right.
thing. And if you wear that, then the hiss can't infect you.
Or the Digimon watches that they have.
Yeah.
I thought it kind of looked like they were wearing like a guitar amp around their neck or something, because it's got this big loudspeaker.
Yeah.
The hiss are cool because they're like noise zombies.
Yeah.
It's like it's spread through noise. When you're walking around and if you listen, the hiss they're all kind of just saying gibberish almost.
Yeah.
And it's really creepy. It's really weird just walking around and you see them kind of floating randomly around, and you can hear them talking, and they're not really saying anything that makes any sense to you. I mean, they're saying words, but none of it really makes any sense. And they're kind of identifiable by that bright red color. So if you see red, oh shit, here comes a fight.
Right.
And it is kind of cool because the word hiss is an onomatopoeia, like hiss. So it kind of like brings about those like kind of creepy evil vibes, and like I think it just takes the idea that it's like a vibrating like resonance or sound based zombie to the next level.
There was wasn't there a part where it's kind of like, does Jesse call them the hiss first, and then somebody else is like, oh, is that what we're calling them?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
I think you're right.
Okay, yeah, so Jesse actually names them the hiss.
She's like the first person that said walkers.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like, okay, cool. That's what we'll use.
Right.
Okay, boss.
Yeah.
Because also this leads us, we fight a couple hiss, and this leads us to, after controlling, or saving our first control point, which becomes a thing we ongoingly do through the game,
which are fast travel checkpoints.
Yes, also that. And it leads us to a group of people who did take the HRAs. Like Morgan had mentioned, they have them on their chest, and you team up with them, and you're like, hey, I'm the new director. And they're like, yeah, that's what we thought. Thanks for saving us. And so you meet Emily Pope. She's kind of the leader of this little band of people that had put the HRAs on. And she gives you kind of a debrief of what's going on. She catches you up to speed. Hey, you're my new boss. Here's everything that's going on. As we've both seen, you kind of know what to do because you've been more effective than anyone so far. But she lets you know about the hiss coming in, that it's infected all of the oldest house, that there are little pockets like her who are with HRAs who are okay, but by and large, a lot of the office is infected. And so going through is going to be challenging and all of that.
And the oldest house is on lockdown.
Yep.
Which is curious why you were allowed inside in the first place. Just throwing that out there.
It's also a nice meta way for them to keep you inside the oldest house, and you're not thinking, well, why can't I go outside the doors?
To New York.
Or why can't the hiss get outside of this building? It's because the oldest house is kind of locked it down. That's what's cool about the oldest house, is it's kind of like a living building in itself. It's a character too.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. Since it's locked down in there, it's sort of Jesse being the watchman, you're trapped in here with me, is what the game ends up being, which is cool.
That quote.
Yeah, it's so good. That's what it ends up being, but right now, instead, it's the Bureau's kind of like, okay, fuck, we can't ruin the world. Let's try to handle it here. And then Jesse enters the scene and is the change agent, I guess.
It's kind of funny how Jessie isn't fazed by anything happening in the game. She doesn't freak out. She doesn't scream when the first hiss charges her or anything like that. She's just like, oh, this is a little strange, but cool. I guess I'm here and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think part of that is like, so we'll talk about this later, but she experienced the hiss early. Like in her and Dylan's childhood, and then Polaris came and saved them.
Right.
But then like I feel like there's kind of like a PTSD-esque or like trauma-esque like loss of memory between back then and now, because she like unlocks those memories later, so to speak. Yeah, it's like part of her knows that like what's here she's experienced before, and she's able to like maybe channel that to like fight through it, or her love and like desire to fight for her brother is what drives her forward.
Yeah.
It makes for a nice second story along with the main story as you're learning her past and her brother's past.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and what's interesting is she's not fazed by it, but she always acknowledges it's weird. She's like, so that was a thing. She reacts to the things, but she's not phased.
Kind of like X-Files-y.
Yeah, she's not phased. She's not scared about it. Those kinds of things. And when she's talking with Emily too, she's kind of gauging the like, how much like can I trust her? So she doesn't tell her about Polaris, and is kind of trying to gauge this because she's like, sure, I guess I'll be the director as much as it's helpful to my ambitions, like we've talked about. The big thing that you get from the conversation with Emily, though, is that you need to go to the hotline to be able to speak to Trench. Because if you go to the hotline, it's, again, kind of a interdimensional phone line, so you can talk to dead people. And so you can talk to Trench and be like, okay, what the fuck's going on? How do I stop this? Sort of deal. So that sort of sets you on your next quest, so to speak, inside there. So first kind of big thing, I guess, actually, so map-wise, the Bureau, the oldest house, is maybe like 4 floors, something like that.
I don't know.
Something 4 or 5.
Somewhere around there. The map, some of them range from bigger to smaller for each floor's map.
Right.
Probably have between like 5 and 10 checkpoints on each floor, I would say, roughly, of that. And so you kind of traverse them. You'll get your objective point on like a certain floor or whatever, and you'll need to make your way there. And so if it's not a place you've cleansed, there's lots of hostile hiss potentially in some of these. And that's sort of how the game gets set up, as you kind of traverse those sorts of things. The first big thing that happens on your hotline mission is you fight your first infected object of power. So object of powers are essentially a object that got paranormal stuff attached to it, and that's how events can happen. So one thing we mentioned earlier, also, man, this game is full of see this other citation. But
yes.
Alter-world events, these are things where something supernatural happens in the regular day world. And what we find in this universe is that often can happen through an object of some sort, and it's called an object of power. That's where the supernatural like seeps into the natural.
So there's a really funny collectible that it's a memo to all office workers, and it's like, don't steal anything because it may be an object of power. And so like, you know, I steal this like red stapler, and all of a sudden like objects in my house are floating around or something like that. Just thought that was kind of a funny.
And there's a guy wwho took something home, right? And gave it to his kid, right? His daughter. And then it was like they had an AW at their house because he just stole something. Because it was an object of power.
Right.
But so something that's happened, though, as the oldest house has become infected by the hiss, is it's also infecting objects of power. So chaos onto chaos sort of situation. And it introduces your first boss fight that you have, which is you fight in a floppy disk that's an object of power. It takes physical form. It's not just a floppy disk, but it's come from that. In defeating this, Jesse learns a new ability, which is launch, which is, you know, being able to...
So isn't the floppy disk like nuclear launch codes?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I just now literally made that connection that like there's this ability that like lets you pick things up and throw them with deadly force, and it's the launch codes to launch nuclear missiles.
Yeah, so I guess I wonder if other objects of power sort of, do they correlate to the powers you get? Do they all sort of make sense, or is it, I guess we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I feel like...
The carousel is the dodge ability, right? The carousel horse?
I think you're right.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, also, as evidence that we'll see now, and many times through this, This game can be very, very, very deep.
Yeah.
Kevin has a book that is heavy to hold about control. Like you could lift weights with it.
Yeah. Or defend yourself.
Yeah, or defend
Yes.
yourself, right. Yeah, you don't need a baseball bat by your bed. You've got a control book.
Yeah, so the book that Dan's
Blockable.
talking about, it's a hardbound art of and making of control book. And I got it for Christmas because my wife knows that I love the hell out of this game. And it just sort of deep dives into all this stuff that we're talking about. I mean, none of us, I've owned it and I haven't read all of it, but I mean, like, I wanted to deep dive into the art and the game and the lore, and so I bought it, and I love this book. But it goes into a lot of that stuff. So it talks about all the objects of power, all the Ultra Rule events, you know, all the characters, deep dives and stuff like that. So if you are a gigantic fan of this game, like I am, look up this book. It's really, really cool.
Right. Yeah, super cool. I really enjoyed looking through it. And with that, there is so much here. You can really go as deep as you want, like we mentioned before, but you can go even further. And with that, there are obviously going to be things that we miss along the way because, oh my gosh, there's so much. In the best way, though. But
A full profession could be remedy scholars.
Yeah.
no, for real. Yeah, I feel like you really could. Yeah, it's wild.
Thank you, Sam Lake, the writer.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would apply for that job. I would take that job. That sounds fun.
Oh yeah. I know that there was. This is tangent A too, but I know like George R.R. Martin, at least for a while, had a guy who was like a continuity guy who worked for him. And that was his job.
Yeah.
He just knew that work
Brandon
so well.
Sanderson does too.
Okay, yeah, right. You know the work so well that you're like the guy the author goes to and is like, all right, am I allowed to do this or what happened here?
I think they
Like that's wild. That like you need to know a work like your job is to be really good at knowing this material.
I read something about that for Dune. Actually, I think it was Dune, but I think it was Warner Brothers Studios. Since they owned the rights to the film, they have two people, or maybe it's the publishing house that owns the rights to Dune. But they have two people on staff that all they do is they know the lore behind Dune, and that's their job.
So Remedy, if you're listening,
So
to
Remedy,
this,
yeah,
Right,
give
you got
us
your
a
guys.
call.
Yeah, no.
They probably already have people though. I mean, there's no way you could keep something this tight and not have like that good a
Finnish guy that's friends with Sam Lake.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. No, very cool though. So we defeat our first object of power. Also, this sets the precedent through the rest of the game. We will ongoingly be meeting new objects of power and fighting them in certain sections. It seems like each floor has one or two that you've got to deal with that could potentially unlock an ability. Like we mentioned, this unlocks launch. This is cool. I know for me, I used launch a lot.
Yes.
More than shooting, more than almost anything. I was just throwing stuff. Throwing people at people, throwing stuff at people, ripping the wall off and throwing it at people.
Throwing explosives at people.
Yeah, them shooting an explosive at me and launching it back at them. Super satisfying.
Launch was the first thing that I maxed out in my skill tree easily. I mean, if I had a point, I put it in launch because it was so useful.
Yep. So this also introduces, I think, the skill tree at this point, which is there may be 5 or 6 skills that you can have that you can devote your points to. So like your kind of RPG would go and build up what your character can be. So launch is the first one you learn. There are a couple other ones. Some of them are more fun than others. Launch was probably the most fun, and
Levitation.
Yeah, levitation was also cool. I think almost all of my points are spent on those two.
Yeah.
Was there any that you guys just didn't put anything into?
The shield.
Yeah, I didn't use shield at all.
Yeah. Was there a health one too?
Yeah.
Okay. Since I was in God mode, I didn't use
okay.
it. I didn't use that one because I was in God mode, so I was like,
I invested a lot into it because I was not.
No,
in God mode.
I dumped stuff in.
I didn't do it because I was like, wait a minute, I don't need to.
Probably didn't
All
do
fun.
dodge either.
Yeah, I just went into fun.
I put quite a bit into dodge too, like the quick. Yeah,
I think most of mine were launch and levitate. Oh, and possessing people.
Yeah, that was cool.
I actually didn't max that out until after I beat the game, but it came in handy a lot once I started using it.
It was great when
when
there were big problems going on.
Yeah, the hard thing about that one is the lower levels. It takes you so long to possess somebody that's kind of like not worth it.
right? And that they aren't perma-possessed either.
Right.
It's only for a certain duration and then they like explode or self-destruct kind of thing.
Right.
You know, they're not going to like follow you until they die, which is too bad. I would have liked that, but whatever. Anyway, launch system, skill trees, all of that. Then you get introduced into another weird recurring thing that happens in the game, which is when you're going to go to where the hotline is, you go and you pull this light switch, like a string, 3 times, and then it transports you into a hotel lobby. Ocean View Hotel, something like that.
Yes.
Yes.
In the hotel, you need to complete a puzzle. You basically ring the counter bell, you go into room 1, you look at how everything's set up, you go back, ring the bell, door 2 opens, ring the bell again, door 3 opens, you need door 3, what's in there to look like what's in door 1.
Right.
You do that, you ring the bell again, you have a key, boom, you're good. And then you can kind of travel through the Ocean View to where you actually want to go. So this mechanic, right, is, I guess more or less, right, there's something that the Bureau wants hidden. You need to arrive at the hotel, solve the hotel sequence, and then you arrive on the other side where you want to be. I assume people who don't know what they're doing get stuck in the hotel and have to leave. They can't get where they want to go. So it's sort of their security measure. Is that about right, you guys would say?
I think so. I think, yeah, and the hotel is just kind of creepy in general. It's like the lights are out and doors open on their own.
There's people like banging on the front door at one point.
Yeah, it's
and,
like a
you
horror
hear like a
movie
rustle
set.
outside.
Right, it's really, really cool.
Very like Stephen King-esque.
Yeah.
So, just a super, super quick aside. You can see Ocean View Motel in the background of the new Alan Wake 2 trailer.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome.
But I actually really loved these sequences. But a critique I have is it felt like it slowed down the pacing of the game. And like especially, if you get stuck. Like Dan was talking about, like fictional people getting stuck, but like if you as a player get stuck too, then it can really slow down the pacing of the game.
Ultimately, you do make it through Ocean View.
Yeah.
You get your stuff right. You've arrived at the hotline. And Trench tells you, you talk to him on the hotline phone, which is just a red phone with one button on it.
Yeah.
And basically, it's if it calls, then, whoever on the other side of the universe needs to talk to you, sort of deal. And you talk to Trench, and Trench tells you to get with his management team. So who kind of his key peers are, because they'll be able to help you solve this issue, basically. So you go back to Emily and say, hey, I got to the hotline phone. This is what Trench told me. And she tells you, okay, well, to be able to get to the other floors, you're going to need to lift the director's override. Because the lockdown, you can still keep the lockdown going, but it will allow you to travel. Like, the building will be locked down, but you can go between floors, essentially. So...
Did you guys... I loved the way the hotline looked. Like,
yeah,
you would hear the ringing and then the whole, like...
The ringing was nostalgic in itself.
Right,
and
then the image of the person talking would kind of take up the whole screen, and it would kind of stick with you as you're moving. It was really creepy and ethereal, and this is kind of a funny story. So the light on the front of my computer is blue. And one night I played a lot of Control, and I put down the headphones for the night, turned off my monitor, and I turned around, and that blue light is shining on the opposite wall,
and it looks like the
and
silhouette.
It felt like
Trench.
the silhouette. It kind of creeped me out.
That's
it was
awesome.
also like, am I the director now? It was pretty cool. But I loved
tight.
it. I loved the way it looked. It's kind of that thing where like you play a game so much that you start seeing like the way you play the game in real life, which is never a good sign, I guess.
the best sign. I love when that happens.
Too many MMO benders in
Right.
high school where I'd play until my alarm to get up went off. And,
Right.
like, you close your eyes and see the screen.
Right.
All right.
I think that's the best sign of a game. I've only had that happen 2 times. I've had where a game has made me dream about it, and I think about it when I'm walking around. It was The Last of Us 1 and 2. And I was like, thinking of like, oh, I would set this like trap here so that my room would be safe, or blah 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 blah. Like I was just thinking in it because of that. So
yeah.
I feel like this is a version of that.
That's totally what happened.
That is the like peak gaming. I feel like if that happens, oh man.
then it's like a high mark for the game, right? It's like,
oh yeah,
this game is so
It's
good.
in
I'm
your
thinking
head.
about it when I'm
Not
doing
playing.
other stuff.
and not in a casual way,
Right?
In a deeper way.
Right.
I think that's even better. Like casually, I will think about games when I not play them, but even further than that, oh man, I love that. That's cool. All right, so from here, you go and find Ati. As part of doing your override, you need to be able to do some stuff. He gives you some janitor chores to do, which, of course, supernatural janitor chores, really. So it's like,
Right.
hey, this thing's clogging up the machine. It's a monster.
Clean the mystic gunk.
Yeah, you do some shit like that to be able to kind of get things going, to be able to do your override. You ultimately end up finding Helen Marshall. She's one of the people that Trench told you about. And you clear the area around where she is so that she can return to the central executive area where Emily is. And she also tells you, you kind of know that she's like a long timer there and has more clearance than Emily. Like, she's the highest up person you've met so far. She also kind of acknowledges right away, like, you're Dylan's brother, kind of thing. And she's like, well, I'll tell you more about him once we get solved in this, once I'm in a safe place. So you're like, all right, fuck it, I'll clear the area so that you can go there. And that's sort of where it sets you up here.
Doesn't she give you the files on like the Prime Candidate program, or you find those in the?
I think you're right.
It's
central...
in her wing of the building or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Helen was one of the coolest characters. I thought
I agree.
You just know, she's
Just
a
a
badass.
badass,
She's
yeah.
just a badass. And even like the way she's dressed, she's wearing like this leather, like long leather jacket with like fur trim, and she's just surrounded by soldiers all the time. So you're like, oh, she must be hot shit, because she just seems cool. She was one of my favorite characters. I think one of my favorite side characters.
She's like the guns for sure of the of like the Bureau of Control. She's the firepower.
I think her title the warden of.
I think so.
Something like that.
Something like that. She's cool.
Yeah.
She was like one character where I was like, every once in a while you'll save somebody, and I'll be like so sucked into the game that I'll be like, I'm afraid to leave these people because like they're gonna get, captured or like attacked, or like there's people like holding an outpost or something, and you're like, she's good. Like, we don't have to worry about her.
Right. And so some of the information you get about Prime Candidate 6. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, is that this is the person who would be Trench's successor.
Yes.
Who would take over the Bureau. And we find out that person is Dylan. That they thought Dylan could be that person. He's got enough supernatural abilities and so forth. They thought...
Got enough ketones, right?
Right, that he could be that person. But it didn't go well. During one of their interventions or whatever of sorts, Dylan ends up killing some agents, and they're like, well, okay, he's too powerful. We can't really let him leave.
Yeah.
So we're just going to lock him up. So essentially it was like, groomed to be successor, psych nah, you're the prisoner. Also, you're very powerful. And you've been here since you were like 12, because we start to learn some of these things. But so Jesse and Dylan had an altered world event when they were kids. They'd found a slide projector that had entered the Hiss, and Polaris saved them.
It opened portals to other worlds. So they flipped open the slide. So each slide on the projector showed another world, and it was a portal to that world.
Okay.
But the slide that they had open was the Hiss and Polaris. And I might be wrong on this. It's a little foggy, but the Polaris and the Hiss might be from two different worlds. I don't know entirely.
And what ultimately happens in that is their town is more or less destroyed. I think 5 people survive. It totally wrecks it. The projector slide gets taken by the Bureau. Dylan gets taken by the Bureau. Jesse manages to run away. It sounds like they're in a spot where both of them are running from agents with Polaris's guidance. Dylan gets scooped up. Jesse manages to get away and has basically lived on her own since a teenager.
Yeah.
Kind of
thing. Just that whole thing about them being kids just sounds like Stranger Things and E.T. and it sounds like a Spielberg movie of just these kids running away from government agents and supernatural elements trying to get them and stuff like that. it's such a cool little side story that like it fits so perfectly into the adult story of what Jesse and Dylan are up to now, that I thought it was cool to listen to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those were some of my favorite files to read. Was just like, all right, what happened in Ordinary?
Yeah, and I felt like, I don't know, I was like trying to put myself in Dylan's shoes back when that was happening, and I felt like if they didn't like capture him, if they didn't treat him so poorly, like maybe he would have become the director, or like maybe he could have like naturally came into that role instead of like being forced into it, and like all these tests being run on him. Like it kind of paints the Bureau in a different light, like a controlling light. So I thought that was yeah.
There you go.
I said it, guys. I said control.
They said the title in the movie.
Right.
What are we, some kind of Suicide Squad?
Yeah. No, you are right, though. Dylan, I think reading those files does kind of show you that other side. So Jesse comes in kind of skeptical, and even, I would say at this point, starts to warm up, but then you get this sort of other side of, they're pretty shitty to Dylan. And, there are parts where you're like, Dylan was a kid and being shitty too, but the Bureau didn't really, they weren't great either.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, would Dylan have been drawn to the oldest house later in life, kind of like Jesse has?
Like, with Polaris.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I think that if they weren't so controlling and like so, gosh, I keep saying it. But if they weren't so forceful, then I think that he would have, rose to the challenge on his own, possibly.
Well, yeah, I guess kind of like when a kid rebels against their really controlling parents, obviously they're being so pushed in one direction that they're going to whiplash back to the opposite one, which is definitely what happens to poor Dylan.
And being locked in a cage, locked in something for so long is what made him susceptible to the hiss.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
His state of mind after being contained for so long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sort of sets you up where they're at. You get some of that info from Helen. You get some of it from Case Files. You get some of it from Polaris and Jesse kind of talking. The next kind of big thing that happens, I think, before Helen will give you further information, is she sends you to Darling's Black Rock Lab. There we go.
Yeah.
Because she needs
cool.
the rocks to do something for defense, right? And so she kind of trades you. Right. Basically, is I'll give you information if you give me stuff to be able to help fight here.
Right, the rocks were how they were powering everything in the oldest house, I think.
Okay.
Is that right?
Like crystals or something.
I feel like the black rock was a form of energy for them.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They processed it and then it became like a fuel or something.
I think you're right. What this leads you to is you end up going into one of the other floors.
The quarry, right?
Yeah, you go to a floor, and then in it is the quarry, and there's this giant quarry on a floor, which, again, the oldest house defies logic. It is truly unique, and this really...
You can see the sky.
Yeah, you can see space.
Yeah, and this part truly pushes that even further, right?
I felt like I was on the moon, kind of.
Yeah. Because as you go through the building, it already feels bigger than it should be, because it is. But then you get to the quarry and you're like, okay, this is impossibly large. You get to fight there. The quarry looks really cool.
And so, like, kind of like, I don't know, an unnatural fear I have in video games is enemies I can't kill. And you have these, like, kind of wandering, like, black hole rubble things that, like, would kind of kick the crap out of you pretty quick.
Yeah.
But you can like kind of freeze them a little bit with the shatter or with a good launch, I think maybe. And there's one puzzle you had to solve where you had to like trap it, kind of. Kind of reminded me of that old Resident Evil game where you have to like trap the bad guy in the furnace and like turn the furnace on or whatever. I don't know.
I just stayed away from those things. Like if I saw them, because they look terrifying. It's light and wind and
I'd always just
around.
I'd always levitate myself and just like dodge away from them.
Yep.
Right. Because you can't kill them, so you essentially have to avoid them.
And keep an eye
they
on
mess
them
up
too.
enemies too.
Yeah.
If you're fighting the hiss and the hiss ends up wandering near one of those things, the hiss gets fucked up. So
Yeah, you kind of just have to keep your eye on them always, or like
Yep.
kind of in the back of your head know where they're at.
But and the one in the Blackrock quarry is the one you always forget about because there's so many little corridors. You're not thinking about it. You're trying to like solve a puzzle or defeat a hiss invasion or something. All of a sudden, this thing comes around the corner and just blows up your whole plan.
Yeah.
So you return back to your Black Quarry adventure. You get the black rocks that Marshall would need. You head back, give them to her, and she's like, okay, I'll tell you where Dylan is. And she tells you that he's being kept in a cell that's, I don't know, in a deep part of the oldest house kind of thing, because after the disaster that we talked about, he's not Prime Candidate 6 anymore. It's not working. He can't be director. Instead, we have to stow him away because he's too powerful to be left anywhere else. And so you fight your way there. You ultimately get to his cell. You find a lot of files along this way. I think you even find some about yourself here, which is trippy.
Yeah, how you were like in the runnings to be a Prime Candidate.
Right, how the oldest house is, the foundations, they've been watching you for since they found you, and they've just sort of kept an eye on you.
Right, and so that you weren't captured, so to speak, because they didn't want to. At this point, it feels like, sort of like, because they've been watching you.
Or did
right?
you run?
Or did you run?
But they were like they were keeping tabs on you.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Like, I feel like if they wanted to have vans show up and put you in one,
Yeah.
like, put a bag over you.
Yeah, they let her think she got away, and she's been kind of on her own ever since.
Yeah, or
Doesn't
like,
she like kind of make a comment about it too when she picks it up? She's like, "Oh, they've been watching."
Right.
right, yeah, because like, sure, she really escaped in the AWE event with Dylan back in the day, but it wasn't like she stayed hard to find for the next 15 years or whatever. Like, they knew where she was occasionally, and if they wanted to nab her, they could have. So that's pretty wild to see files on yourself when you're not like you're not part of you haven't been here.
Kind of hurts a little bit of that goodwill that you've been building up, like having people help you and you saving people, and like it kind of adds to like how they abuse Dylan and like that whole side of things.
Well, and speaking of Dylan, this is the first part in the game we interact with him, and they did a great job of building up Dylan as a character, just talking about him and giving you kind of clues as to who he is. And I remember I was so anxious to figure out, what he looks like. Is he in a good mental state? Does he know where he is, or is he just another hiss, captive? Is he just taken over by the hiss? And Dylan's not okay. He's not okay at all.
No.
And I don't think he was okay even before the hiss invasion.
That's what I was alluding to.
Yeah,
earlier.
he speaks to himself a lot. He's very quiet and reserved, kind of menacing too. He's a creepy dude.
He kills one of the scientists on accident.
Right.
Before he even got his stuff.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So Jesse gets to Dylan's cell. He's not there. Also, along the way, you find other files about Dylan. You can hear audio of him not being well, like Kevin said. You find out that Dylan actually turned himself in at the Central Executive while you were out doing all this. So you go back and you see Dylan. As Kevin said, he is not well. He's been infected by the hiss. He's even talking that him and the hiss are tight. I let the hiss in here. I let the hiss into the Bureau. They really get me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Bureau...
The order against chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
the Bureau is bad. You working with them is bad.
better.
Polaris can't be trusted. That sort of stuff. Instead, you should join me and join the hiss, kind of thing.
Yeah, the hiss is like that 16-year-old that smokes, and Dylan's that 14-year-old that is trying to find some cool kids to hang out with.
Yeah, that's corruption of a minor.
Yeah. Come here, kid.
I like that. He also, in this, reveals that he let the Bureau in through the slide projector object of power from back when you were kids. Yeah, he let the hiss in.
Right.
He says he let it in that way, back from Ordinary when they were kids. So Jesse then is like, okay, well, I've got to go shut that down. so I can deal with this. So Jessie goes to look for the slide projector, and on her way there, she ends up finding a recreation of Ordinary, which is pretty crazy. You see that not only is Dylan or their experience or relevant, but I mean, it's relevant enough that it has like not a whole floor dedicated to it, but kind of. I mean, like the things that had happened with them before this game are big. So there's a recreation of Ordinary. Like she sees what her hometown looked like. It's like a mini version.
Yeah, I really appreciated that backdrop. Just like, I don't know. Yeah, it just felt really cool. Because you fight like, you get trapped in that room and like there's a hiss ambush. And I don't remember if there's a boss. But I think that, yeah, it's just like a giant hiss ambush. But I really appreciated like the backdrop of like the model Ordinary as the fight for that.
Was that the first time you fight one of the heavies? That like the floating guys with all the rocks that are kind of...
Possibly.
Floating around them.
You might be right.
So one thing that this game will do is when they introduce another enemy type, is it'll be like a slightly stronger or it'll be like a stronger version of it, as like kind of like a mini boss.
Yeah.
And then after that mini boss, they'll start appearing just like sprinkled throughout the rest of the enemies in like a powered down form.
Yeah, and there are lots of enemy types.
Yep.
Like when you fight Tomasi the first time, he's the first guy that can launch things at you. But then after you defeat him, then you start to see those like telekinetic people throughout the rest of the game.
That are floating in the chair.
For example.
Yeah. Well, in each one of them, it's kind of like they are like a person, like an individual person that's been corrupted by the hiss, and that's like your boss is like, oh, it's... this guy who was head of this department, and now he's like this evil fucking monster.
Right. Yeah. You battle your way through the Ordinary monument, or recreation of sorts, and you start to look around, and the slide projector is not there. You find out Darling had like a mini lab here. You thought that's where it would be. It turns out he set it up in another location. Again, pushing forward that the things that you had happen to you are even bigger than you imagine. Each time you learn about them, it's even bigger, more important than you first realized. And so now you've got to find Darling's secret lab. And so you go back to Ahti. You do some interdimensional shit with him, right?
Interdimensional shit.
I feel like this is probably where that happens, right? More or less, you meet him. You
you go to like you ride the cable car, like all the way out there, and it's just like this big open like black dark plane with like big pillars in it. Yeah, and it's just like so immersive, like just so expansive.
Is this where Ahti's summer home is?
Yeah,
you can hear it going on. You can hear like waves crashing and seagulls.
Right, because Ahti before this has talked about, I've got to go on vacation. Like, you know, I've set you up to be my intern. You've got to take over. I'm going on vacation. Yeah. And when you get back to his janitorial quarters before this, he's gone. You need to go find him. Yeah. And you basically go to the other side, almost. Like what you described. You see Ahti, and he says, oh, okay, I know what you need. And he gives you his headphones, and he's like, you'll be able to get where you need to go. And you're like, all right, dude. Cool. Let's do it. Also, Ahti is obviously like, I don't know, an angel or interdimensional something in this, that he's not
not a janitor.
He's not simply
something.
He's not simply a janitor.
I have theories that we can't talk about right here because we're not covering the DLC.
Yes, someday. But he's
brings us... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, he's special. He's something else. Yeah. And so he gives us his headphones and says, this will get you where you need to go.
Which brings us to the ashtray maze.
Yes.
So I had gone here before, and so the whole premise is like, I don't know, it's a shape-shifting hallway maze thing that if you don't have the required headphones, you can't find your way through it. Basically, you see the way forward, the way you're supposed to go, and as you approach it, the wall quickly closes around you.
Yep.
And then it just like sends you back to the beginning. I have a tendency when I play video games is to like always try and get places where I shouldn't be without realizing it. So in Ocarina of Time, like in Zelda, I'd always try to like roll past the guy that's keeping me from like leaving the Kokori village without having a sword. He's like, it's dangerous to go alone. You need to be armed. And I'd always try and roll past him because I thought I could do it. The same as with this situation. I thought maybe if I dodge past the like closing wall, I can like get to whatever secrets lay beyond. But I could not after probably about 20 embarrassing minutes of trying.
Yeah, you can't get there. It will not let you.
But now we can because we've got the headphones.
We've got the headphones.
What
so
a
you're
cool looking part of the game too. Just like the way the walls will unfold and reform,
yeah.
And it kind of guides you different ways through the maze based on which part of it closes off and which opens up.
Oh yeah.
And it looks like this old
hotel
60s,
kinda?
yeah, like
It's
a
like
a
the
cigarette
Shining
lounge,
Or like a mansion almost,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah,
It's so
Overlook.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool as hell. So you've got your headphones. You're ready to traverse this maze. You go on, put your headphones on. Boom! Old Gods of Asgard,
Yes.
who we know from Alan Wake. Cool characters, cool music. Fucking heavy metal blares in.
Yeah.
You put your headphones on, and you're the most powerful you've ever felt in the world. You're like running through this maze.
Yeah.
Probably all of us just launching shit at everyone we see.
High octane, like just blasting through these hits. And
Super frantic. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just throwing so many enemies at you, and you're souped up, so you can take them.
Yeah. Also, like, I mean, even for me, I played on God mode most of the game. I didn't feel like a god most of the game. This moment, you feel like it because that's obviously what they want you to feel like, and it's incredible. Like this one moment in the game is like a peak gaming moment in general.
Yeah.
Like, I think even if you didn't like this game, but you got to this spot, you would be like, "That was fucking cool," because it was. You blaze through the ashtray maze, wrecking dudes.
Yeah.
Making your way through this dope song playing.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Incredible.
And it's kind of a Remedy moment, as we've seen with Alan Wake and Alan Wake American Nightmare. So the Old Gods of Asgards are a character in Alan Wake, and they write these songs, and the songs come to life. And the song that they have playing right now is called Take Control. And as you read the lyrics, it actually like kind of spells out some lore for the game, which is kind of cool. So I do recommend taking a look at those. Listening to the song, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever. Yeah, listening to them in Alan Wake got me on Poets of the Fall, a great like kind of rock metal band. So check them out. But yeah, we see the
I feel like this moment, again, even if you didn't like this game, it's worth playing through to get to this moment because it's so cool.
It's even more trippy because you have kind of platforms that are rising and falling, and you'll go through one room, and then the orientation of the room will shift, and you'll be like falling forward, and you're also meeting enemies at the same time. It's just really cool looking, and it's really fun to just go through. And I've played that part of the game like a couple other times. It's just really fun to just relive, and that song is awesome. So it's just fun to play with.
Oh yeah. This would totally be the moment I would replay for sure. Of going back because it was so cool. You ultimately arrive on the other side though, and Jesse finds Hedron, which we find out is either Polaris or a version of Polaris that the Bureau managed to kind of capture. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like a smaller part of Polaris.
Okay. Cool.
like maybe the physical representation of Polaris.
Okay. So you find Polaris. While you're there, you kind of scale your way up it. You fight a lot of enemies in this section. Kind of climbing. Polaris has all these like strands attached to it, and you kind of climb up, and as you defeat one you clear a control point and then keep going, kind of thing. You fight all of these enemies, but also the Hiss kind of ambushes in this spot as well. They end up destroying Hedron in this attack.
Really interesting, just quick aside, this was the only time this mission was pretty challenging, and this was the only time where it had a mid-mission checkpoint that wasn't at a control spot, which was really interesting.
Right.
Because each Spot gave you one, right?
Yeah, I believe so, or every few. And I think that's Remedy just like kind of realizing their target audience maybe, or like the fact that people just might have difficulties at that point, because after they'd heard that everybody's having problems with like certain bosses, they'll like put control points right before the boss so people don't have to like spend so long getting to the boss, things like that. So I just wanted to throw it out there that Remedy, after it was released, like released an update that added those checkpoints and the control points. So that's cool that they're willing to invest in their game after it's released and after they've been paid.
Yeah, it was good. I even died on this because I got knocked off the cliff.
Which,
as an immortal, you can die.
Yeah.
Well, it's like not only are you fighting Hiss, you're removing the tethers on Hedron and Polaris, but you're also platforming.
Right, so, you're flying up.
So all it takes is you pushing one direction too hard, and you're off one of the platforms.
Yeah, done. I got knocked off a few times, but because of those checkpoints, it helps you out. I can't imagine being some badass who went this straight. Someone who beat this at release. Something.
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy.
I died so much during this whole game. I just died a lot.
Yeah, yeah. This game is full of dying.
But when you finally beat it, it like feels great.
Yeah.
Like when you finally beat that spot, that boss, or that ambush, you're just like, I'm a badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You make your way through. Hiss attacks, destroys Hedron, and the Hiss actually infects Jesse's mind here. You kind of see things go red, right? Because Jesse gets infected with the Hiss. Yikes.
No, that's their celebrity. That's their celebrity couple name, Hissy.
Hissy is infected Jesse, right?
Right, exactly. And you get a fake credit roll.
Oh,
so good.
And you're like,
gosh.
Wait. Did I just do all of this to fucking lose?
I got angry. Like
I loved it.
I did afterwards.
Yeah.
Like when it so this credit starts rolling, it gives you like a legit credit roll for like probably like a fourth of the way through it, and that's just enough time for you to be like, man, like did it just end like that? But not enough time where you're like getting up and walking away, or like hitting start to skip it, or whatever. But then the credits start to like dissolve and start to get distorted.
Yep.
And then go ahead.
Yeah. So credits start distorting, and Jesse is stuck in a Hiss time loop. And so instead of being the director of the bureau or any of those things, she's essentially just like an intern who's, getting people coffee and dropping off paperwork and shit like that. Hiss and Dylan are in charge of this time looped bureau that you're a part of. And so, like, I don't know if this happened to you at first when you played, but, I went and tried to fill up all the coffee cups.
Same.
I went and tried to do all the things because it's like...
Because it gives you the objectives.
Yeah, it fills up the bar as you go. And you do it, and then it infinitely restarts.
Deliver X mail, bring X coffees to people.
Yep.
This is the only time in the game where you have, like, a fully staffed...
Bureau.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
Right. Normally, in the sense that it's desk full of people, normally you see a few infected or maybe someone who's got the Darlings thing that they wear, kind of thing. But you go through, you're doing this. You end up then finding an audio message from Darling that you go to take the trench, right? Or to the director. I guess it'd be Dylan, but... kind of in this through going to the Darling messages, you do a few, and it kind of allows Jesse to kind of break out of this.
Just like it slips through a little bit.
Yep.
Each time.
Yeah, because as you take the message to the director's office, it sort of cracks it a little bit, and Jesse's able to resist. That she's not fully controlled by the Hiss. Also, Polaris helps out here, so when Hedron died, it wasn't all of Polaris, it was... the physical manifestation or whatever.
She now resides completely with Jesse.
Yeah. And so Jesse and Polaris are able to break out of this time loop.
I think she actually quotes the song that just played, like, I need to take control, at the end of that sequence, too.
Hell yeah.
Would you guys play a side game where you're, like, office assistant 2022... Foundation assistant, coffee run.
Yes.
It's like a workplace simulator, yeah.
I mean, tons of those have gone up on Steam.
Yeah.
But it's like workplace simulator, but I get to find out about a universe I love.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of creepy and weird.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't feel like this when you fill all the coffee up and it's immediately ready.
Yeah.
That sucked. I was like, oh, okay, that's not my real objective. It's a trick.
But I also feel like that could kind of get dangerously into cash grab territory.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's better left for the internet to decide.
Yeah. Pay to play for that one.
They'll figure it out. Remedy can stay clear, but we could still enjoy it.
Candy Crush, but you're Jesse filling coffee. I'd play it. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, more time in this universe, however you can get it.
Yeah.
I would say. You break out of the time loop, and you manage to...
Do you remember how it happens?
It's through the Darling tapes, right?
So she's basically like, I know what I need to do. This whole time, like...
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like really tense because she has the service weapon up to her head, right?
Yep.
Ooh.
And that's how all this started, with Trench killing himself. So she has the service weapon up to her head.
Yep.
And she pulls the trigger and then wakes up, right?
Yep.
And that was like, kind of like, I want to say metaphorically, like her clearing the hiss from herself.
Right. Yep.
Right.
And it was they keep showing, don't they keep showing her like holding the gun up to Trench's head too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So you do that, you break out of the hiss. In this, you also find out that Trench was actually the one who let the hiss in. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Dylan, like Dylan claimed. Trench did, and he did it because he thought Darling was trying to take over the Bureau. I guess Hedron, I think, had warned Darling that the hiss was coming, and so he made the HRD or whatever to wear for the certain people, and Trench took that as Darling's trying to take over. So he basically killed himself and fucked off to be like, if I can't be in charge, no one can, sort of thing. So fuck Trench for that. And then you kind of get your final showdown. After Jesse gets this revealed, Jesse finds Dylan and the Hiss, who are trying to enter the astral plane. So the way you do that, right, is the pulling the light switch, going through the motel, all that stuff.
Right.
They want to do that to be able to take over the board. Because if they can take over the board, then can the Hiss be stopped? I guess not, probably. And so
they can lift the clamp down.
Yeah.
Escape.
Yep. So you have kind of a giant boss fight, I would say, with Dylan / the Hiss. I guess largely the Hiss, but they're on the same team. It's the object of power, the slide projector from before that you're fighting. You end up fighting it. You win, and it cleanses Dylan of the Hiss seemingly, but he's in a coma. So he didn't die. Something we didn't mention, actually, is before you can't cleanse people of the Hiss. You try to at the beginning of the game with Emily, and it just kills them. But you're special, so you were able to break out of the Hiss. Likewise, Dylan is special, but he was pretty deeply infected with the Hiss, so he's in a coma now. But you've cleared, this object of power. You've cleared the Hiss there. Kind of leads you to your final kind of post-game content, which is there's still Hiss in the office. And so you can continue to play and clear the Hiss as you wish, but you've done kind of your main objective. You beat the big bad sort of deal. So this allows you for New Game Plus, you could essentially, where you could clear the rest of the Bureau if you want. Also, since release, 2 DLCs have been added. From my understanding, they're very cool. I have not played them yet, so we won't talk about them here. But they most certainly seem like a future episode that needs to happen because of the lore and more universe stuff they give you. So we'll leave that to another time. But that is our recap. Now, I guess, kind of moving on to our general thoughts. I know we've talked about a lot of things, but also there are lots of stones that could be uncovered if we wish. Yep. So this is sort of our spot for it. What do you guys have?
So I know we've been talking about trying to spend more time in this universe. They actually have 2 games planned. The first game is kind of like a side game. It's going to be like a squad-based shooter, or from what I'm hearing, maybe something like Left 4 Dead-esque, where you're just like fighting hordes of hiss, that kind of thing. But it's going to be a PvE, player versus environment game. Multiplayer focused game.
And you're playing as Bureau soldiers, right?
I think so. Not Jesse.
Not Jesse, and not any of the other characters. You're kind of just soldiers for the Bureau.
Okay.
Kind of like Operation Raccoon City, like Resident Evil, if anybody's ever played that. And then the second game will be a sequel to Control, but I believe that it won't focus on Jesse Faden. And I don't know. They did mention that was like in the works. I don't know if that is Alan Wake 2, which they have recently revealed, because it's like kind of a mixing pot of like, it's the same universe. They're all like insanely intertwined, that kind of thing. But yeah, we will get some future games in the works.
I wouldn't abandon Jessie if I were them.
I wouldn't either.
I think she's a good protagonist.
What if Dylan wakes up and it's him?
Yeah, I imagine that's where they could go. And like, it seems like with Remedy, they're going to do what they think is right and not try to shoehorn things, which I respect and I'm super down with. But Jessie's a protagonist I would hold on to for sure.
Yeah.
I think she's really great, and I would totally, I don't know, have her go investigate AWEs or whatever the fuck they decide. Like, I would totally roll with her. I think she's a great protagonist.
Yeah, it's like I enjoyed this story so much that I want more Jessie as the main character, but I trust Remedy enough that if they did something different in the same world, I'm probably still going to love it. Like, I'm probably going to still want to play it, and I'll be a day one person on this. So I know you guys talked about Alan Wake in another episode. I played the remake of Alan Wake with the new graphics in it. Not really for me, and I think my problem with it was I played Control first, and so Control has the better gameplay. I just was more connected to the story, so Alan Wake really didn't have the same connect for me, and I might go back to it, because like we've talked about the DLCs a little bit, and that does tie in a little bit more with the Alan Wake universe, but I love this game a lot more than Alan Wake. So.
Yeah. As any past listeners know, I'm a huge Alan Wake fan. I'd say, like, if I had to give a plus in each category to the games, I'd say Control's gameplay, hands down, unquestionably better. With story, I'd probably say Alan Wake, honestly. Like, it's a game that has left me thinking about it intensely. Like, trying to figure out the plot lines and the lore behind it, things like that, and how it connects to other things, like in Remedy's universe, things like that. So, I'd say story-wise, Alan Wake is just such a neat package. Like, it stays true to itself. I don't know. If I had to say story, I'd give it to Alan Wake. But I also don't think that we should really be comparing them. They're both... Alan Wake is like a 10-plus-year-old game. This is 2 or 3 years old at this point, so plenty of improvements have come, just like in the area of gaming itself. So, it's chapter 1, and this is chapter 2 kind of thing.
I think that's what it is. It's Alan Wake's Patient Zero, essentially, kind of thing.
Or Prime Candidate.
Right. Right. He's the beginning kind of thing of where this whole universe started.
It is, though.
And it's cool. Yeah. And then, it's like, oh, we have these other things, and they start to bring them in, sort of deal. I think for me, the big thing, if I were to compare them, is I think Jesse Faden's a lot easier for me to root for than Alan Wake, because he's kind of an asshole as a person. But I don't think he's like a bad person at all, by any means. But I think Jesse's easier to root for, kind of thing. If I were to... If the next Remedy game made me choose, I can only save one of them. I'm probably gonna save Jesse. Sorry.
So I agree, but just as a counterpoint, I think that Jesse, you kind of get like what you get from the beginning, and that's her. But like Alan Wake, you see, selflessly try and save others, things like that. So he's an asshole in the beginning. He's very self-entitled and I'm an author and I'm so cool and kind of a Yeah, just a self-important asshole, but like you see him like kind of selflessly give of himself like throughout the game. So I think that like you have to kind of set him up as an asshole to like have character development through it. So
that's fair. He changes from the beginning of the game to the
Right.
end. Jesse, I would say, is more similar than different by the end. She like actualizes, I guess. Like she
Right.
self-actualizes and is really the bureau director. Because at the beginning, it's almost like she got her trial run
Right.
or whatever. But then, you know, pulling the trigger in the messed up universe and resisting the hiss, she's like full-fledged. She made it kind of thing. But I think, though, too, you know, fucking comparing them anyway doesn't overly matter because it's all part of the same piece of the pie. It's all valuable and good. And I don't know, any hints or cracks or
Right.
peaks or whatever that you get into any of them are great. When I was playing, I stopped, but I stumbled onto the Alan Wake DLC of sorts, probably. That's
yeah,
part of
you-
this.
Oh, so you own it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
bought the
So
Ultimate
you
Edition.
you
so-
stopped before you got... Okay.
I just stopped, but I stumbled into
yeah.
the room and I like read 3 case files. They all had Alan Wake in them, and I was like, I'm gonna go back because
Sure.
I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do this right now. I'll come back. But I was already super intrigued, and I was like, cool, all about this.
Well, and that's something we've kind of hinted at a couple times throughout is the DLCs are incredible. They are so worth it. So I played this game on PC. I got it for free actually last June, I think, on Epic Game Store. It was just one of their freebie games. And I kind of sat on it. You know, I didn't know too much about it. But then I think around, you know, October or November, I was looking for a new game to play. I figured I'd fire this one up. And this is the best free game I've ever owned. Like, I cannot believe a game this good was free. And then, you know, I enjoyed the base game so much. I paid full price for both the DLCs. I didn't think twice about it. I didn't care how much they were. I just wanted more of this game. And like I talked about earlier, I loved the game so much, I ended up buying a $60 hardcover art book for it because I loved the game so much. So just this will probably be in my top 5 games of all time, personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned that you'd be fine paying for the game at full price.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the DLCs definitely. You know, some games I feel like they're a cash grab, or I feel like the big Mass Effect scandal of like the DLC was on the disc when they shipped it, but like they just blocked off access to it. Like they actually developed this afterwards and like kept working on the game, which I think is really cool. And they give you whole new areas to explore. Just like super tiny, super quick. I know we're not jumping into the DLC, but I actually kind of got scared during one of the parts of the Alan Wake DLC. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And the DLCs are gigantic. I mean, you know, like Morgan was saying, sometimes you get DLC and it's an extra mission or it's an extra little map, you know. So you would think, oh, maybe the DLC for Control would just be another floor of the Foundation or something like that. But it's so much more. There's so much. They're huge games in and of themselves, and they're just DLC. So you know, another point to remedy for just building a really fully fledged DLC and not just kind of phoning it in.
And the
for
lore
more money.
editions are just insane.
Sure, yeah. It adds so much more to the story that you kind of already thought, oh, I kind of already know what's going on here. This adds even more to it.
Yeah, which is huge. I think that just the investment that they have in their universe, I think that, shit, if they surprised us and it wasn't an Alan Wake or Control sequel, they just put out some other game, and you're like, well, is it part of the universe? You're like, all right, fine, I'll pick it up. Like, I wanted those things, but if they surprised us and it was something different, it'd probably still be good.
I feel like the only game that they've released that isn't a part of the Alan Wake universe is Death Rally so far, an old like top-down car fighting game. But they released the Max Payne series. Like the first 2 games were them, and then Rockstar did the third one. And you play as this like loose cannon cop that can like slow down time to like bullet time fighting. A lot of people, myself included, believe that he is Alex Casey, the character that Alan Wake writes. So I think that those universes are connected because he does come to life.
Well, and I know that the actress that plays Jessie was in Quantum Break. She was like a side character.
Yeah.
I haven't played Quantum Break, but yeah.
I think that if we're comparing Remedy games, Alan and Quantum Break and Control are much more comparable
than Alan Wake.
Yeah.
I'll have to give it a try then.
Yeah, I want to play that
Just
one.
in terms of like, you kind of have abilities and like it's an interesting story, and it's kind of like an in between Alan Wake and Control. With like Quantum Break, you have like kind of an interweaving story that like you have to like sit and think about for a while, but then it also has the action elements of Control. So
That's cool.
it's cool.
So I feel like a character that I really loved that we touched on a little bit, but I thought Dr. Darling was one of the best characters easily in the game, and I loved his real video that they've that's kind of like Remedy's thing, right?
Yes.
Is they put live action video inside the game.
Uh-huh.
But I loved his little videos to you, or really just to whoever has come to like help the oldest house. But I thought he was such an interesting character, and he's really funny. And did you guys know he's in like Robin Hood Men in Tights? Yeah, he's I forget which character he plays, but he obviously he's the voice of Alan Wake.
Yeah.
So he's
I thought that was an unfortunate casting decision, kind of.
Yeah, an old Remedy standby. Yeah, and that's it's a little. If you like Alan Wake and you know him really well, then you're kind of like, why does Dr. Darling sound so much like Alan Wake?
It bugged me until I looked it up.
Yeah, but he's such an interesting character and really funny, and it's just really cool to see him pop up in different parts of the game, and you kind of watch him break down mentally as you're watching the hiss take over and as you're watching everything else happen.
Because he's trying to prepare for the hiss.
Right, yeah, and he's kind of losing his shit because he knows that he's not going to be able to do it. Cool dude.
Yeah, he's great. I'm glad you mentioned that too, the live action of the videos. I thought about that along the way and forgot to say it, but that is something that is cool, is that you'll get videos, and most of them are Darling, and he's telling you some shit about the Bureau, or something pretty sciencey, since that's his field. And it's cool. He's awesome. I really liked him too.
All of the videos in the game were really funny too. There's Darling's two assistants that always look really confused and they don't really know what they're doing.
They're like just kind of scared of him a little bit.
Yeah, they're a little scared, and they're kind of looking at the camera and looking at each other. There's the what is the puppet show? Something Twins. But I thought that was really funny. It's like this bizarre, creepy ass puppet show of in the universe, and it's kind of it relates to stuff happening in the game, but it's done in such a funny way. It's like a kid's show, but it's like this really bizarre, like you would never want to show a kid this puppet show.
And one of the files actually talks about, it's like they wanted kind of a sneaky way to get kids used to thinking about the supernatural.
Yeah.
Like as a real existing thing.
Yeah, they even talk about how they hint at a show like X-Files, that the idea was to sort of introduce these ideas. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right, because they brought it back.
Yep.
Because they were like, oh, this was like Twilight Zone. But it was like, oh, it was on in the 60s. Let's reboot it so we can bring this back. Yeah. That was cool. I like that file. Also very Bureau. Like, that makes sense to do that based on all the other things we know about them.
Yeah.
Of trying to, manipulate people and so forth.
So, what was your guys' play styles? I know everybody... What I've read before is that everybody kind of has their favorite service weapon, their favorite way of playing. How did you guys play the game? What did you use the most?
For me, I threw stuff at people most of the time. That was my big thing.
Yeah.
And I used, basic service weapon, whatever you start with. That was mostly...
The pistol.
I just used the pistol most of the time. Mostly that and throwing stuff at people. Near the end, I started taking over people some too.
Okay.
But that was mostly what I did. Mostly throwing.
Taking over people is pretty useful during boss fights, because the boss would attack them sometimes instead of you.
Right, give a little distraction. And it's like, all right, you can die.
And you can kind of like start controlling people and move around or whatever.
Yeah, but throwing things was very satisfying the whole time. Even after doing it the whole game, I still like doing it at the end.
I even found myself like, I want to get a closer look at this object. Let me like grab it.
Right.
So then it would like launch in front of my face, and I'd be
Right.
like, oh, this is what it says. Now let me launch it at the wall.
I liked when I killed people or almost killed them and then could grab them and
Yeah.
throw them at people.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, soldier, you're getting launched.
Yeah, launch just looked really cool, and I loved the effects of
physics.
pulling parts of the wall
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
And then throwing it at somebody. It looked cool, and it was so satisfying to just throw a chunk of rebar at like one of the hiss agents or something.
Yep.
And like it kind of created like almost a gravitational pull of like things around it slightly.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I used Shatter a lot, which was like the shotgun. I would kind of let my enemies get in close, and then I would just like pepper spray them with like shots as much as I could. I didn't use Pierce at all. And
I didn't like that one.
Yeah,
And I've read that a lot of people do.
I've read that too. That a lot of
feel like
people
the game's
really
too
liked
fast-paced.
Pierce. Right. I don't know how you'd have enough time to charge up your shot and then line up the shot. You know, especially if you have like one of the flying enemies. There's no way you're hitting one of those. I would much rather just
Maybe if
pepper
you're setting
spray
up the
'em.
fight.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
You see them ahead of you, and you're
maybe if you're sniping them from across the map, but I didn't really play that way. All of my fights, I would be flying, I would be throwing shit, and then I would use guns as soon as I was out of stuff to throw at them.
Yeah.
So,
So my play style, I'd basically be trying to move as much as possible. I'm always in the air. I'm always launching things and using the charge. So
Yeah.
the charge is like, you can like, basically a little grenade launcher kind of thing, and you can like hold the trigger down and it'll like throw out 3 projectiles and you can release them. They have a pretty wide area damage that can actually hurt you also, so that's why I was just constantly in the air. And then when I fought the flying guys, or maybe some more agile enemies, I had to switch to the service pistol.
yeah.
To the pistol. But
My one thing with charge was that if for whatever reason the game decided that there was a speck of dust somewhere between you and the enemy,
it would hit
you
that.
would get
Yeah.
wrecked.
You
I
can't
would
use
get
it on the
wrecked.
ground, really.
Yeah, it doesn't really work that well. I like the weapon though.
And it's also a little rough on some of the, like the prime candidate sector.
Yeah.
Where like there's these giant bridges in the air, and you're like, you can't really fly around without looking.
Yeah.
You know, you'll fall off the edge and die, and it'll restart you, that kind of thing. So, that does remind me. Since we've kind of thrown out our playstyles, I'll move on a bit. This game does have a consequence when you die. You lose resources. That so as you beat enemies, as you find chests, you find resources that you can upgrade your weapon, upgrade your abilities, things like that. If you die repeatedly, you'll lose these resources. And I think, Dan, you mentioned that's what kind of led you to God mode, was you didn't want to lose those resources.
Yeah, I was losing resources and I wasn't sure how important they were or not. And so I was like, I'm just going to God. Like, I would have staggered more.
Yeah.
Like, I've, more ammo or more life or whatever. But I was like, fuck it. I don't want to deal with this. So I switched to God. And that helped.
Sorry.
So that was good.
Yeah. One recent trend I've been seeing in video games is like the lack of a consequence for dying. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't think it hindered me enough that like I was afraid of it. I'd keep throwing myself at the enemies or whatever without adjusting the difficulty. I actually beat the game without adjusting the difficulty, but I didn't really think that the loss of resources was that bad.
That's good.
Yeah, just as a general comment.
No, I beat it without adjusting the difficulty, but I did die a lot. And Morgan, you were kind of talking about how it's like you got this sense of pride or like a big sense of reward for beating something that it took you so many times to beat up against.
Yeah.
But Morgan, did you do the challenge missions where you had to go to the 4 different platforms?
Yes.
Those were so difficult.
Yeah.
And as soon as you beat the first one, you're like, oh, I have to do it again, but harder this time.
Yeah.
I haven't beat the 3rd round of that so that I could get... There's a really cool outfit you get if you beat all the rounds of that. But that was really challenging, but also really fun if you just get into it and you just kind of like...
Kind of want a horde mode.
Yeah, if you just want something to do, that's a good way to play. I know we talked a little bit about like the effects in the game. I think this is one of the best looking games I've played in the last couple of years. And if you play on PC, well, I guess if you play on consoles now too, there's something called ray tracing, and this game is probably one of the best ray tracing games that I've ever seen. I'm talking, if you're in front of a glass window, you get a full reflection in that glass window. Or if an enemy on the ground is in a pool of blood, you can see his reflection in the pool of blood. And I just think it looked incredible, and it really helped you sink into the game and feel like the realism in the world of seeing those effects. There's a kind of a cool thing that I saw, I think it was on the Control subreddit, where somebody zoomed in on one of the characters' eyes, Emily Pope. They zoomed in on her eye, and you could see Jesse's reflection in Emily Pope's eye. I mean, that's how much detail ray tracing added. And I mean, it's insane. It's insane, and it's not something anybody's ever really gonna use or would know to even think about, like, looking into. But man, it's so impressive that we're at a point where graphically you can do that, and it's still playable.
Right. Yeah. That was one of the things about playing Control initially that I faced with the before they added the control points in between huge boss fights, like next to them. I would die from this pretty hard boss fight, and then like Tomasi, I died countless times. He's the first launching enemy you fight. And so I'd have this like pretty long load-in time because I was playing on Xbox One at the time. Nowadays, when you play on I have a Series S and play it on that, and it loads in super quick, and I'm assuming it does on the PC.
Yeah.
You have a pretty powerful rig.
Yeah.
So the loading times mixed with the travel time of like running to the boss was pretty brutal back in the day, but now we're in the clear.
Yeah, I feel like it would make... You talked about how you kind of had to take a break from it for a little bit because, and I mean, I think that amount of backtracking would make me kind of think twice about, man, am I going to want to do this like 20 times, running back to the same place? So that was a really good call from Remedy to add those extra points.
Just like unskippable cutscenes.
Yeah.
Before a boss fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darn you, Cerberus and Kingdom Hearts.
Nice. I think that covers. Does anyone else have any other things that haven't come up?
I could talk about this game for hours and hours and hours. So I think I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, all right. So this moves us on, lastly, to some listener feedback, seeing what other people thought about this. First up, we've got thoughts from Player One on Twitter, who said Control had some truly phenomenal atmosphere and world building. The writing was also good and genuinely funny at points. The gameplay was pretty polarizing, I know, but I thought it was pretty good overall. Also sold me on the value of ray tracing in games. So, like Kevin said. Yeah, I think we mentioned it a couple times, but this game is... We didn't talk a ton about how it's funny, because a lot of it's just you enjoying the environment and seeing those things or reading lore and stuff. Mm-hmm. This game is definitely much more funny than you would have guessed, kind of thing.
It's got that, like, kind of touch of dark humor or almost absurdist humor.
Right.
Where it's got, on one hand, the, like we talked about earlier, just like the weird, and then on the other, it's just mundane, and that mix of things is just pretty interesting.
It made me think, I've been watching this show on Apple TV called Severance that has a kind of a similar vibe to this game, actually, where it's sort of the mundane life of office work, but there's also these weird, supernatural, just kind of out there elements that are also going on. Mm-hmm. So if you like Control, maybe give this show Severance a try.
Nice.
Next up we have Do You Want to Continue on Twitter. They love it. Some of the best third-person shooting I've ever experienced. Ending was a little flat, though. I do agree. I felt like the ending kind of came up quick. And then, so games with New Game Plus, at the end of them, I feel like, or just like you can continue on in the world, tend to leave a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because it's like either they pretend that you haven't beaten the last boss yet, or they just kind of prolong the how good the ending could have been, I guess.
No, I agree. I loved everything about this game, but the ending kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't realize, that's the end. Okay.
I don't know how they would have done it, but I would have been pretty happy if, like, I guess they would have had to do some of the stuff before. But if it just ended right after the ashtray maze, I would have been totally cool with that. Just because it was such a high. Like, if there was somehow... Like, you'd have to do some of the story points earlier to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But if you could have just ended on that, because that was such a high, and then to go down at all, like... It's not how it ended was bad, but you just hit such a high. Like, you were at a 10 out of 10 gaming experience for, like, 15 minutes, and it was so fucking cool. Yeah. And then it goes to an 8. And 8's pretty fucking good, but it's just not the... You were at the coolest thing that you've done in, months.
I guess from what I've learned in, like, film school is you're supposed to have falling action. So it kind of makes sense that, like, you'd have this, like, super high. You'd have this action leading up to it, like 5, 6, 7, and then you hit that 10. And then afterwards, it's kind of like, okay, now we're at an 8. And, like, but also, I felt like that period where you are going to, like, shut the projector off, the board, like, powers you up, right? Mm-hmm. It, like, makes you insanely strong, and you're just, like, still kind of blasting guys. You just don't have that sweet soundtrack, but... Yeah, so it makes sense, like, when you think about classic film structure, to have, like, falling action after that.
I think maybe it wouldn't have felt so flat if it had been a little different, a little more different from the ashtray maze. Because you're kind of doing the same thing that you were in the ashtray maze as you are at the very end, where it's like, I mean, you're in a different place, you're in, like, the astral plane, but you're basically just beating waves and waves of guys and working towards a point. So, good call out.
So I guess if they weren't trying to leave room for a sequel, maybe they could have wrapped it up a little nicer.
Sure.
Like she could have pushed out the hiss, but then that wouldn't have left us room for a sequel.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe the ending could have been stronger if they weren't leaving the door open.
Right.
So to speak.
Johnny on Twitter says, didn't particularly care for the combat, but quite enjoyed the story. And the ashtray maze run brought a huge grin to my face. Yeah, I mean, that's just what we were talking about. The ashtray maze is just the high point it's the climax of the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
And here's a perfect point, Dan, like you were saying. Here's somebody that didn't really care for the combat that much, but the ashtray maze was just so cool. You can't deny that it was good.
Oh, it's so good. It's so great.
The combat did become tedious when... Especially, so one flaw I see in the game, personally, is, like, kind of how difficult it is to navigate through the oldest house. Like, the maps are a little unclear, and it's, like, floors stacked on top of floors, things like that. And backtracking through previous places, like, enemies will respawn, things like that. Like, I can especially see where combat becomes tedious in those situations. But, like you said... Everybody appreciates something different in gaming, and the fact that this kind of gives you a workaround for the combat where you can just, like, kind of story mode everything. Mm-hmm. I think it's fair. I think it's a fair critique that, the combat's not for everybody. I had a blast with it, personally. I thought it was very fun and inventive.
And that they added more fast control points through the game, too. Because I imagine that slogging back and forth through things when there weren't a lot of control points versus, like, by the time I played, I could just fast travel to a lot of places and wouldn't have to deal with a lot of bullshit along the way that I didn't want to. And if I ran into some I didn't want to, I'd just run away. But I also, like, couldn't die, stuff like that. So I was able to avoid some of the things I didn't want to do. But when you couldn't, I could see that being cumbersome for sure. Makes sense. Cameron on Twitter said, it didn't work for me. Too much world building was behind the scenes in written objects in the world and audio logs. That said, ripping a piece of wall and throwing it through the enemy is pretty cool. Yeah, I can understand that. I think if you are not in a mood to listen to audio logs and read shit, this probably wouldn't nail. I think just like with Bioshock. Bioshock is fun in the same manner of, cool, I have powers and I'm shooting people, and you can have fun that way. But if you don't want to engage in the audio logs and things like that, and that, you can do that, but I think it would maybe have it land less home.
Right.
In the same manner.
I could see if you were playing multiple games at the same time, or let's say you just don't have the time to throw, 30 hours into this game, it just might not be for you. And I mean, that's okay. But I really appreciated just having so many layers to really just like dig into.
Yeah. If you don't want to dig, I could see some of this falling. But as they said, though, throwing shit at people, super fun.
Never gets old.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. And then we have Daniel on Twitter. Control's fantastic, but play it on PC. Daniel is probably referencing to possibly the load times or better graphics available.
I wondered if he meant, controller versus keyboard.
Also, big possibility.
I feel like the load times, because I've read a lot of things of people who played it on like base PS4 when it came out, that it fucking chugs.
Ooh,
I played it on PS5 and it was fine for me.
My Xbox sounded like it was trying to like take off.
Wow.
Like fly away. It was
Okay.
it was churning the jet engine.
No, that makes sense. So I bet those on PS5 it was totally great. But I bet on those older last gen.
So he continues to say, they continue to say bonus points if you play Alan Wake or Quantum Break first. Some of the best effects I've seen in a game, and Courtney Hope does a fantastic job. Yeah, we definitely agree with that. Dana and I are both fans of Alan Wake, and Courtney Hope is wonderful. Mm-hmm. That's part of why we were talking about the sequels earlier, and we were like that we really wanted it to stay with Jesse Faden, kind of, just because Courtney Hope was fantastic.
Yeah, she's great.
So Viking Gamer on Twitter says, yes, I loved it. 100%. The game tied in well with the references to Alan Wake as well.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this would be a great game to 100%. I haven't managed that yet, just with all the collectibles, all the different things. But it's very satisfying to just like find new pieces of information and get to plug in that next piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Pogo on Twitter said, just played it. I absolutely loved the story, setting, and the whole Lynchian atmosphere. Combat, not so much. I didn't find it terribly difficult, but a difficulty setting must have been added, in my opinion. So, Pogo is either way, way better at games than I am, or maybe they had some settings already that were set that were helpful. But, nice job. And I think fits a lot of what we've been reading, too.
Yeah.
Other people said.
John on Twitter. I couldn't get past the first boss who was floating around the room and throwing things. Yep. This is our commiserating. I agree with you, John.
I think that's all of us.
Yeah. When the game first came out, I bought this game, and that was before the accessibility options were added, and I quit the game for the first time at that point. So, and John says, I tried a bunch and then moved on to other games. I enjoyed it up to that point. So I actually replied to you on Twitter, I believe, John. I said to check out the accessibility options, so definitely do that if you have time and if you feel like Control will be worthwhile for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam on Twitter said, that game was great. Highlights were Dr. Darling and the hotel. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's what we're talking about, man. It's all about Dr. Darling. It's all about the hotel. It's all about these places that you don't see stuff like this in every game. It's good characters, good settings, good story.
Yeah. Larry on Twitter said the story and characters are amazing and so well written. Gameplay can be difficult at times, in some cases pushing towards tedious. I think that hits with some of the things we've just said recently, so right. I feel that.
Alex on Twitter. Didn't like it. Found the setting and enemies boring and repetitive. Didn't like the story. Combat, once you had a few abilities, was probably the highlight for me.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I think that all games land with people different ways, so yeah, I could see it. That's too bad. I feel like some of the things that landed with us, unfortunately, didn't land with them.
Yeah, different games are for different folks. Yep. You've covered so wide of a variety of games on your podcast. Yeah. From touchy-feely emotional games to like the Football Manager game and like Mario Kart. So, different games are for different folks.
100%.
So Zek on Twitter said, I love it. Eli on Twitter said, enjoyed it a lot. Stopped playing it due to other games that came out around that time, but would love to get back into it. It was fun looking around for all the connections to Alan Wake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hope Eli jumps back on that.
Especially with the AWE DLC and the announcement of Alan Wake 2.
Yeah. I feel like liking Alan Wake is probably worth jumping back in. For sure.
There's a ton of main game non-DLC connections to Alan Wake 2. Like the references to there's 100 collectible thermoses in Alan Wake, and they're referenced as objects of power, which is hilarious, but their only ability is to just keep drinks warm. So maybe it's just like, maybe we have objects of power in our universe and they're just Yetis.
That's great.
So, I mean, Eli has the same point, we've talked about before, where it's kind of like, if you don't have the time to play just this game, you might not have that deep, time to really dig into it like we were talking about.
Yeah, that's true. It does seem like its reward is based on if you want to dig. If you don't want to dig, I think you can have fun. Like, throwing things is fun. But
kind of like Horizon Zero Dawn. Shooting arrows at dinosaurs is amazing and great and super satisfying gameplay, but reading all of the past tidbits will help you connect with the characters in a really meaningful way.
Yep, totally agree. Joseph on Twitter said, loved it. Definitely one of my favorite games in recent memory. So, awesome.
Big agree there. Scott on Twitter, loved it. Got the platinum recently after playing it for the second time. As you accrue abilities, you feel like such a powerful character by the end, floating through the air, flinging bits of environment around. And the ashtray maze section is an amazing gaming moment.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of wrapping up all of our thoughts, really. I mean, those are our highlights.
Yeah, I feel like that totally rounds that out perfectly. Ashtray maze, one of the best things, for sure, that I've played. And overall, all of that. Also, going back to a game to platinum it, that's always a good sign.
Yeah.
If you like a game enough to want to jump back in and clean up whatever's there so you can be there more, always a good sign. So, that's what we thought about Alan Wake. That's what other people thought about Alan Wake. Or Control, rather. You're right, not Alan Wake. Remedy Universe.
We'll fix that in post.
Remedy Universe. But... yeah, that is this game. So if you've got more you want to talk about it, hit us up on Twitter at StoryEverPod. I'd love to keep dialoguing about this. Our website, TheGreatestStoryEverPlayed.com, has links to iTunes and all the other places you can get our episode. Alan Wake is on there, so if you want more of this, go get that. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.